What is up, guys? Random Money here, and today we're going to be talking about Marksmen. This video is a follow-up to my How to Find Your Ideal Playstyle Class and Subclass video, so you have not watched that, I highly recommend that you do. And before we get into this video, I just want to give a very special thank you to all the Marksmen mains who answered my questions and helped me make this video. Marksmen are the largest class in League of Legends, so I've decided to break this video into two parts. This video is part 1, where we will discuss the marksmen that are primarily played in top lane, the jungle, and mid lane. In part 2, we will discuss the marksmen primarily played in bot lane. This video will cover GNAR, KAYLE, KENNEN, Quinn, Graves, Kindred, AZIR, and CORKI. Keep in mind that this video was made during patch 7.7 before the mid-season update, so item builds for marksmen may change after the mid-season update. I'll be posting an updated video once the meta stabilizes again. There are 3 things that define marksmen. 1, they are ranged. While melee champions typically have a range of 125 to 175 units, ranged champions have a minimum range of 400 units, with several champions exceeding a range of 700 units. Number 2, they rely on auto attacks for a significant portion of their damage. This doesn't mean that all marksmen exclusively use auto attacks. It just means that auto attacks aren't an afterthought like they are on a lot of mages or ranged supports. Some marksmen rely almost exclusively on auto attacks, but some also heavily rely on their spells, weaving in auto attacks between each ability. And number 3, they typically have low resistances and low health pools. This isn't to say that marksmen can't build tank items, it's that they aren't as effective when they build tank items. Marksmen typically build glass cannon in order to maximize their damage. This third point is extremely important because it makes a marksman very easy to kill. Because of this, how a marksman stays alive is a defining characteristic of each champion. In general, there are 3 ways that a marksman can survive. 1, mobility, 2, crowd control and or utility, and 3, range. Each of these options have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. While some marksmen only have one of these 3 ways to survive, most have at least 2 or even all 3 of them. The chart before you is not an objective measurement of how much of each form of survival method each champion has. Rather, it is a subjective measurement showing you how much each champion relies on each form of survival method. Graves, for example, has very short range but very good mobility, and also has an AoE blind that provides him with some additional crowd control and utility. He relies mainly on his mobility for survival, but he does have that one form of CC that can help him get out of trouble. Kindred is another mobile champ with a low cooldown dash, who also relies on the slow on her E and the utility of her ultimate in order to stay alive. Kennen has decent mobility and escape potential with his E, but he mainly relies on the stun from his passive in order to survive. GNAR in mini form has mobility in the form of his E, a speed boost from his W, and a slow from his Q, which gives him multiple ways of staying alive. KAYLE primarily uses the slow on her Q and the invulnerability on her ultimate to stay alive, but she also has additional utility in the form of her heal and some additional mobility from her heal as well. Quinn, while being an extremely fast champion, only has access to this mobility while out of combat. In combat, Quinn relies on the blind from her Q and the knockback on her E to keep enemies from harming her, as well as the utility of her W to spot out potential ganks. This is why Quinn winds up almost exclusively in the crowd control utility section of the chart. In the lower left we have CORKI, who uses the range on his phosphorus bomb and his rockets to poke enemies at a safe distance, and his W to get out of harm's way when enemies get too close. In the middle of the chart we have AZIR. This is not because he lacks in any of these areas, but rather because he relies on each of them in equal measure. By positioning his soldiers appropriately, AZIR can have increased range or increased mobility, and his ultimate also provides him with crowd control to stay alive. This next chart shows how each champion primarily deals damage. Starting on the left, we can see that Graves, Quinn, and Kindred all primarily deal physical damage. All three of these champions rely both on auto attacks and their abilities to deal damage, but Graves is slightly more reliant on his abilities since he can only fire twice before needing to reload. Immediately to the right we have GNAR. GNAR also deals primarily physical damage, but he does deal a little bit of magic damage, which pushes him slightly more to the right. In mini form, GNAR is very reliant on his auto attacks in combination with his W to deal the majority of his damage. However, in Mega form, GNAR relies primarily on his abilities in order to deal damage. Continuing to the right, we have KENNEN. KENNEN is unique because he has two extremely different builds that he can go. With his on-hit build, he is extremely reliant on auto attacks and deals hybrid physical and magic damage. With his AP build, he's extremely reliant on his abilities and deals almost exclusively magic damage. Next we have KAYLE. KAYLE is another champion that deals both physical and magic damage, but the majority of her damage is magic based, and she deals the vast majority of this damage through her ranged auto attacks that she gets from activating her E. CORKI is similar to KAYLE in that he deals hybrid damage, with the majority of that damage being magic damage. Where they differ is that CORKI is extremely reliant on weaving auto attacks between each of his abilities to get maximum sheen procs. Finally, we have AZIR. AZIR is unique because he auto attacks through his sand soldiers, which deal the vast majority of his damage. This makes him extremely reliant on his auto attacks, but causes him to deal almost exclusively magic damage. The marksmen most commonly played in top lane are GNAR, KAYLE, KENNEN, and Quinn. GNAR is considered a vanguard in mega form, KAYLE is considered a hybrid enchanter, KENNEN can also be played as a hybrid battle mage, and Quinn has some assassin and skirmisher tendencies. KAYLE is also commonly played in mid lane and also in the jungle. The marksmen most commonly played in the jungle are Graves and Kindred. Graves is considered a hybrid skirmisher. Finally, the marksmen most commonly played in mid lane are AZIR and CORKI, with AZIR being considered a hybrid disruptor. Now we're going to go into each marksman and talk about what makes them unique, what are their strengths, and what are their weaknesses. I'll also give you the most common runes, masteries, skill order, and item builds for each marksman. For a champion's core items, I only put the items that are built in most games. Situational items are organized from most common in the upper left to least common in the lower right. These builds may not be the optimal way to build these champions, but they are a good starting point for anyone looking to pick up the champion. I highly encourage you to check out each marksman's subreddit and statistical websites like lolalytics.com, as well as check out high elo streams and guides to get alternate ways to build each champion. GNAR, the missing link. GNAR is two champions in one. In mini form, he's an annoying marksman who is fantastic at kiting. In mega form, he is a terrifying vanguard capable of CCing an entire enemy team and single-handedly winning a team fight. Think about that for a moment. Half squishy marksman, half beefy tank. This duality makes him one of the most unique marksmen in the game, and is what makes him so appealing as a champion. In mini form, while less tanky, he gains the benefit of range, which allows him to easily farm and harass opponents. As GNAR uses his abilities, he gains rage. When his rage bar fills completely, GNAR turns into mega form. This transformation is spontaneous and cannot be stopped once his rage bar is full. What separates good GNAR players from bad ones is proper management of his rage bar. A good GNAR player doesn't let his rage control him. He controls the rage and only unleashes his mega form when it's most optimal. Once Mega, GNAR only has 15 seconds to use his enhanced form to the best of his ability before he returns to Mini form again. Once Mini, GNAR can generate any rage for 15 seconds. This is why it's so crucial to control your rage and time your Mega form properly. While GNAR's Mini form can be a potent duelist, his Mega form is much more optimal for team fights due to the massive amount of AoE crowd control he possesses. Skilled GNAR players will harass the enemy team before a team fight to build up their rage bar, and then wait until someone steps out of position to turn Mega and punish them for their mistake. If you enjoy the tactical positioning of being a marksman, but sometimes you like to hulk out and smash stuff, then GNAR may be the perfect blend of marksman and tank for you.
Come here. I'll teach you all about the afterlife.
KAYLE, the Judicator. KAYLE is League's embodiment of an angel, saving allies with healing and invulnerability while simultaneously smiting down enemies with a fiery sword of justice. KAYLE is both marksman and enchanter, making her one of the only champions in the game who has both high damage and high utility. There's even a meme in the League community called KAYLE Can Do It, since KAYLE is such a versatile champion. Doesn't matter what role, KAYLE can do it. Need CC? KAYLE can do it. Need damage? KAYLE can do it. Need healing? KAYLE can do it. Need tank shredding? KAYLE can do it. Need split pushing? KAYLE can do it. Need team fighting? KAYLE can do it. Doesn't matter what it is, KAYLE can do it. Despite KAYLE's versatility, she does have some weaknesses. She typically builds glass cannon, which makes her very fragile, but her short attack range means that she typically has to be in the thick of a fight to deal damage. Teams with high engage and high amounts of CC can burst KAYLE down before she can deal damage or use her life-saving ultimate. Additionally, KAYLE's build path requires a lot of gold in order for her to be effective. Her base damage is not very high, and she's extremely reliant on her ultimate until she gets at least 3 items. KAYLE is not a mechanically intensive champion. What truly separates good KAYLE players from bad ones is proper positioning to deal maximum damage and proper use of her ultimate. Good KAYLE players don't just use KAYLE's ultimate to save someone's life, they use her ultimate to negate as much of the enemy team's damage as possible. A KAYLE who does both of these things can shred through an entire team in the late game and single-handedly win the game for her team. She's a great champion for marksman players who want a little bit of everything without sacrificing too much of anything.
Their final moments approach.
KENNEN, the Heart of the Tempest. KENNEN is one of the most unique champions in the game, and I'm sure there are a lot of people scratching their heads, wondering why I'm including him as a marksman. I agree it's a bit of a stretch, but hear me out before you get the torches and pitchforks. KENNEN is an extremely versatile champion. So versatile that he has 2 completely different but equally viable build paths. Recently, the on-hit KENNEN build has seen a lot of popularity increase and has even been seen in professional play. This build has KENNEN run traditional ADC runes and masteries and build multiple on-hit items. This build relies on KENNEN's W along with multiple attack speed items to proc stuns on as many people as possible. The more traditional build is AP KENNEN. This build relies on KENNEN's AP ratios and his ultimate. This kind of KENNEN attempts to rush into the enemy team with Lightning Rush and Protobelt, pop his ultimate to stun the entire enemy team, and then use Zhonya's to avoid instantly being bursted down once the stun wears off. On-hit KENNEN is clearly a marksman, while AP KENNEN fits more as a battle mage. For these reasons, I classify KENNEN as a marksman and as a hybrid battle mage. The reason why I classify him primarily as a marksman is that even if you go AP KENNEN, his laning phase is very similar to that of a marksman. It's only in his mid-game and late-game team fights that he plays like a battle mage. People love KENNEN because of this versatility. There are few champions in the game that have as diverse itemization as KENNEN. Regardless of what build you go, what separates good KENNENs from bad KENNENs is proper management of their marks of the storm. A good KENNEN always knows when his empowered auto attack is coming up, and he plans his trades accordingly so that he can land his stun on his opponent, deal some damage to them, and then get out of range before they can retaliate. After whittling down his opponent, KENNEN can use the same combo and then all-in his opponent, activating his ultimate and using his Lightning Rush to ensure his opponent can't get away. The strength of KENNEN is being able to adapt to your opponents, using your kit and your item versatility to outsmart and outmaneuver your enemies to destroy them.
Justice takes wing.
Quinn, Demasia's Wings. Quinn is a dueling marksman, a lane bully who snowballs very hard and who can rotate quickly to other lanes to snowball even further. Quinn is one of the fastest champions in the game thanks to her ultimate. Her roaming potential and ability to punish people who overextend is virtually unmatched, since she can activate her ultimate at any time. Once in combat though, Quinn is a very immobile marksman who relies on her crowd control in order to survive. Quinn has two forms of crowd control, a potent blind on her Q and a displacement ability on her E. Proper use of these abilities is what separates a good Quinn from a bad one, and is what allows her to snowball a game out of control. Quinn's blind is actually technically classified as nearsightedness, preventing those who get hit by it from seeing anything around them. This makes it effective not only against auto attackers, but mages who rely on skill shots to land their damage or crowd control. This single ability allows Quinn to outduel most marksmen and mages. Quinn's E, when used properly, can interrupt dashes of enemy champions. This is her primary way of outdueling divers, skirmishers, and other melee champions who rely on closing the distance in order to deal damage. These two abilities, when used properly, can allow Quinn to outduel most champions in the game. Quinn specializes in flanking opponents and using her insane movement speed along with her W to find lone enemies and eliminate them quickly. Quinn struggles in team fights where there are multiple threats that can lock her down and eliminate her. In some ways, she plays a lot more like an assassin or a skirmisher than a marksman, but she doesn't have the escapes of a true assassin or the conditional defenses of a true skirmisher. Quinn excels when the enemy is split between multiple objectives, dashing behind enemy lines so she can pick them off one by one with superior speed and vision.
Dead man walking.
Graves, the Outlaw. Graves came out in 2011, but he was reworked in Season 5 during the Marksman update because his playstyle was too similar to some other marksmen. This rework reduced his range and gave him an ammo system of only 2 shots. In order to compensate for these nerfs, his damage and survivability were increased greatly. The reduction in range and the ammo system pushed Graves away from being a bot lane marksman, but the buffs to his damage and survivability made him extremely well suited for the jungle. Jungle Graves is now the norm, but he still can be played as a laner in some situations. Graves is a hard-carrying, farm-oriented style jungler. He scales extremely well with items and is extremely good at dueling enemy junglers or other laners. His burst damage from his Q and his ultimate allow him to quickly eliminate most squishy targets, and the resistances he gains from his True Grit allow him to outlast in duels with tankier targets as well. Graves needs gold in order to be effective, so what separates a good Graves from a bad one is jungle efficiency. A good Graves is able to quickly clear the jungle camps and maximize his time exerting pressure across the map. What separates a good Graves from a great Graves is managing your stacks of True Grit. Graves can gain up to 120 armor from his True Grit in the late game. That's thousands of gold and free resistances that Graves can get. Great Graves players keep max stacks of True Grit throughout a team fight, making it extremely difficult to kill Graves before he kills whatever is in front of him.
Never one
Without the other.
Kindred, the Eternal Hunters.
Lamb, tell me a story.
There was once a pale man with dark hair who was very lonely.
Why was it lonely?
All things must meet this man, so they shunned him.
Did he chase them all?
He took an axe and split himself in two,
So he would always have a friend.
so he would always have a friend.
Kindred is the embodiment of death in the League of Legends universe. Half light and half dark. Half graceful and half savage. These two halves are known as Lamb and Wolf. Lamb represents the civilized side of death, rewarding those who accept death at their appointed time with a graceful passing. Wolf represents the savagery of death, mercilessly hunting down those who try to escape the inevitability of death. In game, Kindred is extremely dependent upon her marks. If they are able to stack their marks, Kindred can snowball a game out of control. However, if their marks are taken by the enemy jungler, then it is very easy for Kindred to fall behind and become useless. Kiting jungle camps is also extremely important for Kindred. Kindred is a relatively fragile champion, and she needs to kite effectively in the jungle in order to be high enough health to contest her marks when they appear. Good Kindred players will predict where their marks will appear and swiftly take them before the enemy jungler can move to oppose Kindred. Great Kindred players not only predict where their jungle marks will spawn, but also effectively mark out-of-position champions and gain additional marks by slaying them. Kindred's ultimate is a complete game changer, able to help both allies and enemies. Bad Kindred players can wind up actually helping the enemy team more than they help their own with a mistimed ultimate. Great Kindred players save their ultimate for the most optimal time, ensuring that their team receives maximum boon from it, while their enemies receive nothing but swift death. Why people really fall in love with Kindred, though, is their personality. Kindred is one of the most unique champions in the game, and not only has an amazing style, but also an amazing well-done voiceover. The conversations between the erudite lamb and the savage wolf are both haunting and comical, providing endless entertainment in-game.
Shurima, your emperor has returned.
AZIR, the Emperor of the Sands. AZIR is the ascended Emperor of Shurima, a powerful tactician who summons an army of sand soldiers to protect him and slay his enemies. AZIR is considered one of the highest skill cap champions in the game. He dominated professional play for longer than nearly any other champion in League history. Because of his god tier status on the pro scene, he was nerfed repeatedly. This brought AZIR back into line for professional play, but because he has such a high skill cap, this caused AZIR's win rate to plummet in solo queue. AZIR is not a champion that you can pick up on a free week and expect to be successful with. Mastering AZIR can take hundreds or even thousands of games. People don't play AZIR because he's easy to get free wins with. They play him because his kit is amazingly fun, complex, and rewarding. Nearly all of AZIR's damage comes from his sand soldiers. When AZIR has a sand soldier summoned, his auto attacks become the sand soldier's auto attacks. AZIR can reposition the soldiers either offensively or defensively, and dash to his soldiers either to escape or to finish off a low health enemy. Proper positioning of AZIR soldiers is what makes him so hard to master. Not only do you need to worry about controlling AZIR's movements, but you also need to control his sand soldiers and position them correctly in order for them to actually deal damage. Late game, AZIR can be an absolute monster, since he can move his sand soldiers to bypass the enemy tank line and attack the squishy carries at a much further range than they can attack him. Furthermore, if the enemy team initiators try to engage onto AZIR, he can knock them back with his ultimate or reposition his soldiers to dash out of harm's way.
I'm up to snuff and got me an ace machine!
KORKI, the Daring Bombardier. KORKI is a true hybrid champion. He deals both physical and magic damage, and he relies equally on both his auto attacks and his abilities to shoot down his enemies. Unlike most other champions, KORKI has no forms of reliable crowd control. His job is shredding enemy defenses and dealing tons of damage. In laning phase, KORKI has excellent kill pressure and pushing power. Where KORKI really shines though is in the mid game, due to his low cooldown ultimate and his synergy with Trinity Force. A fed KORKI can not only burst down squishy champions, but he can also cut through tanks with surprising speed. KORKI's hybrid damage also makes it very difficult to itemize effectively against him. It means that KORKI can fit well in pretty much any team composition. What separates a good KORKI from a great one, though, is proper use of their package. Every 8 minutes, KORKI can pick up the package in base, granting him bonus movement speed and the ability to cast Special Delivery, a massive version of KORKI's Valkyrie that deals damage as terrifying as Rumble's ultimate. This Special Delivery also knocks enemies out of KORKI's path, allowing him to split enemy teams or prevent a lone opponent from fleeing. Proper use of KORKI's package in the mid-game can snowball games out of control and give KORKI not only insane lane pressure, but insane map pressure as well. The biggest disadvantages to KORKI is that he doesn't scale as well into the late game as some other mid laners or marksmen, and that his only crowd control is his special delivery. KORKI relies on winning his lane and then using his package to snowball the mid game out of control, giving his team a commanding lead that they can use to close out the game before the enemy team has any chance to scale. So which of these marksmen is your favorite? Also, what kind of marksman do you think Riot should develop in the future? One of the things that I love about the marksmen discussed in this video is that nearly all of them are hybrids with another class, or they have a completely unique playstyle. I'd love to see some new hybrid marksmen in the future that do more than just insane amounts of damage. If you have any questions about any of the marksmen, please leave a comment below and I'll do my best to answer it or point you in the right direction. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more, please give this video a thumbs up and let me know which subclass you want me to do next. And of course, if you made it this far in the video and you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my videos. I hope you all have a fantastic day. This is Randomonium, signing off.